Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Thursday, July the 1st, 2021. It is currently 3:34 p.m. Central Time. And once again, I'm coming to you live from the headquarters of the Theology Central Podcast. And those headquarters are located in a mysterious location known as Ovalo, Texas. Few people will ever find Ovalo, Texas, no matter how hard they look, okay? Because we are in the middle of nowhere, Texas. But yes, I'm here in the headquarters of the Theology Central Podcast. Does that make us sound more official? Does that make us sound more important? Am I overestimating our importance? Go back and check our archives for a podcast episode on overestimating our spirituality. I think is a very important conversation and discussion. It would be worth your time to check that out. But we're not here to talk about what we have talked about in the past. We're here to talk about something today. So let me begin by offering a full-blown apology. I'm going to try here to bring a couple of news articles together. And I'm going to try to bring these articles together and put them together to formulate, hopefully, some very important, thought-provoking, challenging, maybe at times controversial comments that I'm going to make. But I'm apologizing because I'm going to need a little bit of freedom to just really try to think out loud. A lot of stream of consciousness type of thing is going to happen here. I did not sit down and write out any notes. I mean, typically I don't have really very many notes. So I kind of do this frequently, but because of whenever I do it, I guess sometimes I feel bad afterwards when I do it. So I guess in this case, I'm already feeling bad before I even get started. And I guess the reason I feel bad is I always want to bring you the best episode that I can bring. But at the same time, I want to create a podcast. Again, I've stated this now a lot recently, that I'm just a sinner in front of a microphone, and I'm trying to figure out the Christian life. And I invite you to stop by and let's discuss it. Let's talk about it. So I like it to feel not all polished and produced, but just very real. I'm here just talking to you. I'm asking you to stop and go, let's consider some things. So this is what I want to do. I want to just have kind of a stream of consciousness discussion with you. If you're listening live, feel free to jump in and participate using the Spreaker app. Hit the little chat icon and you can share your thoughts and opinions. If you hear this later, email me at newsif@yahoo.com and offer your thoughts and opinions. But I want to look at really two concepts: the changing church and the missing people. The church is changing. Christianity continues to undergo a change, a transformation, and I continue to tell you this. Biblical, historical Christianity is slowly but surely being written off the face of the earth. And the way it's happening is that Christianity is turning into something other than historical biblical Christianity. It's still going to call itself Christian. It's still going to have church on the side of the building. It's still going to have a cross. They're still going to hold up a Bible, but it's no longer going to be historical biblical Christianity. It's going to have a form of godliness, but it's going to be missing actual historical biblical Christianity. It's going to be a shadow with no real substance or meaning. And I continue to say this. And what is happening? Here's what's happening. On one side, right? Let me just throw this out there. On one side, we have a Christianity that's being completely politically hijacked. Absolutely, completely politically hijacked. And so those Christians are becoming like, we got to fight the culture through politics. And it's about politicians and political parties and about getting people elected and getting bills passed and fighting the culture war. And so Christianity stops being Christianity because, again, just go look at the Great Commission. We're not called to go out there and fight the culture wars. We're not going out there to fight politically. If you already believe that, you can argue with me all day. I'm never going to agree. The New Testament, Jesus wasn't saying, hey guys, when I leave, we got this horrible, mean Roman government here, and we got to get them removed from office, and we got to take back our country. It was never a call to take back our government, fight the government, get people elected. Let's fight this culture war. No, it was go and preach, go and teach, That's evangelism. Baptize, bring it to the church, and then teach. That is discipleship. 2, preach and teach to equip saints so they're no longer tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine, and to equip those Christians that they can go out and do the work of ministry, which is then teach in the evangelistic way. Teaching people that there is a God, that he is holy, that they are sinners, and their only hope is repentance and faith in the finished work of Jesus Christ. And by placing their faith in him, his imputed righteousness is accredited to their account, that they stand before God based off his imputed righteousness. Their sins are forgiven and they are declared righteous because of that imputed righteousness, not based off works or what we do. Very basic message that needs to be proclaimed to people. That's what the church is called to do. But on one hand, we got this politically hijacked church, politically hijacked. And this political hijacking is happening from 2 different sides. You got the conservative, Republican, right-wing hijacking of the church, and then you have a progressive, left-leaning, liberal, some will refer to it as woke ideology hijacking the church. So here's the church in the middle, and it's slowly but surely being devoured from 2 different sides. 2 different sides. One side is it's going, America, Republican, Trump, all that kind of thing. And the patriot churches are on the rise. All of this just far right leaning. And it's all about, we got to take America back and we got to fight and it's all about culture war. It's just, again, if you want an example of that, listen to American Family Radio. It's a Christian radio network, and you'll hear this political right-leaning Republican hijacking of the American church. That should scare Christians to death. And then on the other side, being devoured from the other side, is the left-leaning, progressive, woke concept eating away the church. And so the church is changing. And not only is it changing in that way, look at what's happening in churches. Let's just take, for example, let's take the Southern Baptist Convention. All right, they just had their convention meeting. They elected a new president, Ed Litton. All right, there's major issues going on with Ed Litton that I guess no one seems to care about anymore in modern day Christianity, right? On his church website, there was a doctrinal statement that referred to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit as 3 parts of one God. What is that? That's not Orthodox historical biblical Christianity. That's ancient heresy. He gets called out for it. He doesn't even, when he does, is handed the mic, and you can go listen to our discussion and investigation into the whole situation. We play the audio clip right from the convention where it's called out. Nobody addresses it. It's deleted. Like the doctrinal statement is deleted from the website. I don't know. Some say 45 seconds. Within minutes, gone, and nobody cares. What? Wait, nobody cares? If you've got a non-Trinitarian at the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, or at least someone that doesn't even understand Trinitarian theology, maybe you should really address this. But I guess no one cares. Because why? We don't care about theology. We care about politics. We care about culture wars. We care about numbers. We care about money. We care about everything other than theology, doctrine, and church history. All right? So nobody cares. That's a major problem. Wait, the Southern Baptists have Rick Warren, one of the largest Southern Baptist churches, one of the largest Southern Baptist affiliated churches, whatever the correct language is, who ordained 3 women in ministry. Now they're going to form a committee, I guess, to look at it. Maybe they'll get to it next year. In the meantime, what is that telling everyone? Well, I guess if you're Rick Warren and you're a Southern Baptist affiliated church, go ahead, ordain women. Nothing. There's no consequences right now. It's going to take a year to investigate. What does there need to be investigating? Do the Southern Baptists support the ordination of women? If the answer is no, hey, you pick up the phone. Hey, Pastor Rick, we've seen images online, and there's news stories saying that you ordained 3 women in ministry. Did you do so? Yes. Do you realize the Southern Baptist Convention is opposed to ordination of women? Do you understand that? Yes. Are you going to repent, remove their ordination? No. Okay. Well, then we have no choice. I'm going to have to bring some witnesses. Are you not going to repent? No. Okay, then we're going to have to remove you from the Southern Baptist Convention because you're teaching something that's contrary to Scripture and the teaching of the Southern Baptist Convention. But I guess they're not going to do anything. I mean, at some point they may do something about it, but why does it take forever? I don't understand it. It's like, what are you investigating? One phone call should be able to clear it up. It's all over the internet. So you've got someone who's elected president that you don't really know what's going on with him doctrinally. Then he gets accused of plagiarism. They kind of clean that up a little bit. You got what's happening to the Southern Baptist Convention? What's going on there? Now, there's been problems in the Southern Baptist Convention for a very long time. That's why, if we go back far enough in history, that's why the fundamentalists left and created independent churches, independent Bible institutes, and pulled out of the Southern Baptist Convention because they was like, enough is enough. There's major problems going on. What's happening there? Now, that doesn't even count what's going on in denomination after denomination, church after church. So you've got all of these things happening. Let me give you another example of the changing church, right? So you got the political hijacking going from left and right. For a practical example, we got the Southern Baptist Convention. Don't even know what's going on there. Got major issues happening there. Here's another example, all right? Here we go. United Kingdom, UK-based Methodist Church. So the United Kingdom-based Methodist Church votes to approve gay marriage and recognize cohabitating couples. Cohabitating couples, I think I state it correctly. So let me read this again. This was published on June the 30th. UK-based Methodist Church votes to approve gay marriage, recognize cohabitating couples. Now, before we even get to the Methodist Church in the UK, the Methodist Church here in the United States of America is an absolute total mess right now. You got, I guess, a breakaway from a conservative side. You got a breakaway from an ultra-liberal side. You got a kind of a moderate in the middle. I don't even know what's going on in the United Methodist Church. They're a mess right now, right? So the church is changing. Here's the story. The Methodist Church of the United Kingdom passed resolutions to approve the blessing of same-sex unions and recognize cohabitating couples. The London-based Methodist Conference announced Wednesday that it has voted to confirm the resolutions as its gathering held in Birmingham, if I could speak right. Birmingham, there we go. A report on marriage and relationships, God in Love Unites Us, was received by the conference in 2019, and the local district synods were asked to consider the provisional resolutions and report back to this year's conference, a statement detailed. The conference received a report on the results of the local conferring, which showed that 29 out of the 30 synods confirmed support for the provisional resolutions. The conference voted 256 to 45 to allow its ministers to perform same-sex wedding ceremonies and for churches to be locations for such services. The Reverend Sonia Hicks, that sounds like it's a female pastor, so you already got problems going on there in the Methodist Church. The conference's new president, and she's the conference's president, said in a statement that the debate over the resolutions has been conducted with grace and mutual respect. As we move forward together after the historic day for our church, we must remember to continue to hold each other in prayer and to support each other, respecting our differences, Hicks said. Regarding cohabitation, the reference approved a resolution stating that it recognizes that the love of God is present either through informal cohabitation or a more formal commitment entered into publicly. As a church, or I'm getting messages here. As a church, we wish to celebrate that the love of God is present in these circumstances, even if that grace is not responded to or even discerned by the people concerned. Continue the resolution. All right. The church has an important calling, therefore, to point to the presence of God's love within such relationships. All right. Here we go. All right. I'm going to try to turn down the volume because I'm getting too many messages here. All right. Let's see here. That if people are listening, if you message me through the chat on the Spreaker app, then there's no disturbing notification sound. It just shows up on my computer screen. All right. Let's see here. The church has an important calling, therefore, to point to the presence of God's love within such relationships and to encourage people to respond to it in the renewing and deepening by whatever means of their commitment. All right, so basically, hey, God's love's there no matter what your relationship status is, whether just cohabitating, doesn't matter if you're married, and just respond to it, I guess any way you choose. The Reverend David Hull, a chair of Methodist Evangelicals Together, a group that opposed the resolution, called it a very sad day for the Methodist Church. It's heartbreaking, really, to see where we've come and the way in which we've got here. And many of us have wept over it. In spite of these votes, there are many, many Methodists who still believe that Jesus offers a unique vision for life, one that is rooted deeply in the Bible, that is better than the world has ever known, better than the world will ever know. That includes his teaching on marriage and relationships. Others have taken to social media to voice their support of the resolutions. I am absolutely thrilled that the Methodist Conference has overwhelmingly voted to allow same-sex marriage in their churches, stated someone who's a gay Anglican evangelical activist and founder of a foundation. This reflects the significant shift that there has been amongst Christian attitudes in England. So in England, there's been a shift in Christian attitudes. It's the changing church. So you got Methodists. Hey, you're cohabitating? Fine. We'll bless that. That's wonderful. Don't worry about it. So in other words, you're basically blessing cohabitating. I mean, maybe there's some situations where people are living together and they're not engaged in physical intimacy, but I think in a lot of cases they would be. So I guess ultimately what the church in the United Kingdom has done is they've blessed same-sex marriages, they've blessed homosexuality, and they're now blessing basically fornication. So, hey, it's all good. It's all good. That's the changing church. The church is changing. So you got the political hijacking of the church. You got the church changing and again, this is the right and left. The right will try to fight as many of these cultural issues as a culture war. The other side just caves into the culture war, and no one is handling it from a biblical perspective. The church is drastically changing, and I apologize for reading through that article relatively quick, but I didn't have time to go, take it apart piece by piece. All right, so I do understand I went through that relatively quick, but that gives you the basic idea. The church is changing. There's no question about it. Now, I don't know what's going on in your church. I have no idea. But you've probably got the political hijacking of the church, and then you've got the standard dangers that are found in churches all across America, and that is theological illiteracy, biblical illiteracy, very weak and shallow preaching, not teaching doctrine, not teaching theology, not teaching church history, and you've got that problem. That's been going on for years and years and years and years and years. The church is changing at a rapid pace, and it's not a good sign. It's a very problematic sign. And if you're there, what do you do? What's going to happen? Well, not only is the church changing, all right? And I've articulated that to the best. I could go in more detail, but that gives you at least an idea. There's something else that's happening. While the church is changing, people are missing. And it appears in relatively large numbers. Let me give you 2 reports indicating this. All right, here we go. More than 25% of regular churchgoers have no plans to go back just yet. More than 25% of regular churchgoers, these are people who attended church on a regular basis, they've decided, I don't know if I'm going back yet. I'm going to have to give it some more time, going to have to think about it. 25%. Well, let me make it very clear. People don't show up. Here, think about it. You got the churches that are being compromised politically. You got the churches that are changing all of these other different ways. You've got all the problems going on in the Southern Baptist Convention. You got churches that are falling apart because no doctrine, no theology, no church history, all of those issues. All of that's just happening. And then 25% are kind of like, peace out. I don't know if I'm coming back. I'm good. I'm good. Well, guess what? If that 25% makes up a lot of people who are a part of decent churches, then the decent churches, I know this is hard to believe. If people don't show up, I know this is going to be revolutionary. Churches cannot remain open. You have to have people there. You have to have people there giving, because if they're not giving, you can't keep the lights on. You can't pay right here, I'm in a church building. Guess what is required for me to be on the air right now? An internet connection. It costs money to pay for that monthly internet bill. I got to have people showing up, paying the bills so that I can even be on the air. But 25%. Here's some information from this story. More than 25% of people who attended religious services at least once a month before the novel coronavirus pandemic have no plans to return to their church, synagogue, mosque in the next few weeks as lockdown restrictions cannot continue to be lifted, according to data from a recent AP NORC poll. Now, to be fair, that's 25%. It sounds like they said the headline says churchgoers. Now, that 25% may also include people who are part of a synagogue and a mosque. So exactly what's the percentage of churchgoers of Christian churches? We would have to break that down. But still, it's something we need to pay attention to. Data from a nationwide poll conducted between June the 10th and the 14th with over 1,000 people has the margin of error. It goes through all of how they did this. It says the percentages show that while many people are looking forward to reconnecting with friends, family, shopping, fun, and going out to eat as the lockdown restrictions are lifted, only 34% say they plan on attending in-person religious services in the next few weeks. Hey, they're ready to get back out. They're going to go out and have fun. They're going to meet with their friends. They're going to go, but church, I got to put that off for a little while. I got some catching up to do, and that does not involve church. Yeah, that's, a majority, 73% of people who attend religious services at least once per month say they plan on attending those services in person in the coming week. 27% say they have no plans. Well, the number of worshipers who plan to attend in-person worship services as lockdown restrictions continue to be lifted has increased from 66% a year ago. Lifeway's research executive director told the AP that it's a cause for concern. Now, this is Lifeway. Now, Lifeway, I think, is part of the Southern Baptist Convention, if I remember correctly, but they produce, small group material, Sunday school curriculum. In fact, I have a bag over here with a number of Bible study guides from Lifeway. So now you're dealing with the Christian world. Now we're dealing with the Christian world specifically. The Lifeway research director said, this is a cause for concern that many churches, this is a cause for concern that many churches did not survive the pandemic, leaving some people in limbo. Now, Lifeway is arguing that part of the reason some people aren't going back is because their church no longer exists. Now, if the church no longer exists, guess what? Why they no longer exist? Because the people of the church stopped supporting it. You say, well, they closed down for the pandemic. Okay, well, what were they doing to minister to you? Why didn't you continue to support them so that you could survive, so that now everything could be back to normal? There's a lot of momentum there's a lot of momentum to lose, and a lot of people stepping out of the habit of weekly worship, McConnell told the news service. The data appears to be in line with a new Gallup analysis highlighted by the Christian Post earlier this year, showing a marked shift of a highly religious nation away from formal church memberships. The data showed that for the first time in nearly 80 years, fewer than half of Americans maintain formal membership in a specific house of worship. In 1937, Gallup, when they first measured formal membership in houses of worship, some 70% of Americans had formal church membership, and that measure remained steady for the next 60 years until it began a steady decline in 1998. In 2020, formal membership stood at 49%. So the church is changing, and people are missing. They started missing before the pandemic. Church membership had already declined. And then during the pandemic, many people said, you know what? I'm not going back. I'm just not going back. I'm not going back. Forget it. I'll just stay at home. No. How is the church going to survive? What do you do? Now, there's more information here, but I have another story. Let me see if I can find it. I think the other one is from the Associated Press. Give me a second. It's got to open here. From the Associated Press. Okay, maybe it's not going to open. I've got the link right here. Let me find the link. Here's the link. Now it will open up the Associated Press. Okay, here we go. No, I don't want notifications. Okay, here's the headline. Millions skipped church during the pandemic. Will they return? Well, with millions of people having stayed home from places of worship during the coronavirus pandemic, struggling congregations have one key question: how many of them will return? As the pandemic recedes in the United States and in-person services resume, worries of a deepening slide in attendance are universal. Some houses of worship will not make it. Let me state it again. So the church is changing. You're worried about that the culture is sliding, into the abyss. And I guess good churches, they're worried they're not even going to survive because people are like, I'm just not going to come back. Well, what's going to happen if people aren't there? It's over. Smaller organizations with older congregations that struggle to adapt during the pandemic are in the greatest danger of a downward spiral from which they cannot recover, said the Reverend Gloria E. White Hammond, lecturer at the Harvard Divinity School and co-pastor of a church in Boston. Right, that's a mouthful. On the Maine coast, the pandemic proved to be the last straw for the 164-year-old United Methodist Church. Even before COVID-19 swept the world, weekly attendance had dipped to 25 or 30 at the white clapboard New England church that could hold several hundred worshipers. The numbers further dwindled to 5 or 6 before the final service was held Sunday, and that was the end of that church. The remaining congregants realized they couldn't continue to maintain the structure and decided to fold the tent. We can't entirely blame everything on COVID, but that was just the final blow. Some people have not been back at all. In Virginia, the Mount Clifton United Methodist Church experienced a similar fate. The church can seat more than 100, but the number of weekly worshipers dwindled to 10 to 15 even before the pandemic. The small white church built on a hill in the Shenandoah Valley in the 1880s may be rented to another congregation, or it may be put up for sale. It's a complicated picture overall, but the pandemic was the straw that broke the camel's back. In the United States, the largest challenge for places of worship came against a backdrop of a decade-long trend of a smaller share of the population identifying as religious. It's too early to know the full impact of the pandemic. Surveys do show signs of hopefulness and also for concern. About 3/4 of Americans who attended religious services in person at least monthly before the pandemic say they're likely to do so again in the next few weeks, according to our recent poll. That's up slightly from about 2/3 who said in May that they would be if they were allowed to do so, but 7% said they definitely won't be attending. These findings are in line with the Pew Research Center of U.S. residents last summer that found that 92% of people who regularly attend religious service expected to continue at the same or higher rate, while 70% say that they will attend in person less often. Then they have the Lifeway research where saying, hey, there's some problems going on here, and we don't know what to do. They got some more stories here about churches closing, basically shutting down. I mean, you got a lot of information going here, but the bottom line is a lot of people aren't coming back. People are just dropping out. So what do we do here? All right. Well, now there could be a lot of factors. So let's think about this. All right. Now I know that was a lot of information. Took 27 minutes to work through all of that information, but I wanted you to at least hear it. All right. There's a lot to process. So I'm going to now try to process this in real time. So just stay with me here. Here's a couple. I'm going to try to go through a couple of things here. I'm not going to try to say number one or number two because I don't know how many points I'm going to have because, I'm just thinking out loud here. Right. So just stay with me. Right. Just imagine we're having a conversation here and we just looked at all of that information. You've got your perspective. I'm going to offer my perspective and you can tell me what yours is when I'm done. All right. Or you can start telling me right now in the chat. Right. Here we go. Or you can email me at newsif@yahoo.com. Here's a couple of things. Number one. Oh, see, I just said I'm not going to do that. All right. So let's not say number one. All right. Let's do this. When I look at this situation, I think there's at least one issue. I think there's a number of issues, but there's at least one that I think we have to take into consideration. The church is changing. And I think a lot of people are looking at their church and going, what in the world is going on? What is going on? This is happening. This is happening. The church is becoming too political. I'm sick of the politics. I'm sick of the weak preaching. I'm sick of no doctrine. I'm sick of no theology. And then COVID hit. And many disagreed with what their churches were doing. They didn't like what their churches were doing. Whatever the case may be. And so guess what? They started shopping around because, hey, it was the pandemic. Churches that had never thought about live streaming started live streaming. Churches who never thought about putting their sermons on the internet started putting their sermons on the internet. And people started shopping around. And they were like, you know what? That's better. That's better. Now, many of those people shopped around because their churches were changing and they weren't happy with it. But here's, I think, how some shopped around. That's the church. That's the teaching I want. And then they started just listening from home. And they were like, you know what? Why go? I found my church. There it is. I'll just listen. And as an anonymous person, they'll never know who I am. I don't have to support them, but I can benefit from their ministry. I'm not going to send them any money. Not going to do anything. But now I found it. And that teaching online is 1,000,000 times better than what I was getting at going to that church. And that church is such a mess. Now, it may be true. The church is such a mess. And I've got to be very careful how I say this because some people may accuse me of heresy, but I want to really challenge you on this. Look, if you can be at a church in person, please do everything you can. We need in-person churches to survive, and they won't survive without people. Look, if people aren't there, you have to cancel services. Like, hey, look, we're still struggling to get back to where we were. We're still struggling, right? And in this church, we're still struggling. Right? We're at the lowest point we've ever been. Right? So if people don't come back, well, then guess what happens? Well, don't have enough. I mean, I got one person who can show up on a Sunday night or whatever the case may be. Guess what? Then you don't have an in-person service and you start basically eating away at the church. You got to have people. A church can't survive without people. So here's the thing. If you can, please do everything in your power to be present in the best church you can be in. Be encouraging, be present, participate, and please support not only with your time, your talent, whatever you can, even if it's only, loose change, support what you can financially. But if you're in a situation where the local churches seem to be an absolute total train wreck, an absolute total mess, and you don't know what to do, and you don't even feel like you can support that, then by all means, I hate to say this again. You need to be in the best local church you can be, but if you can find a ministry that will feed you spiritually, and you're listening to them online, then at least do this: make yourself known to them. Kind of say, hey, you're going to kind of be my go-to for now until I can figure out what to do maybe for a physical church. But for now, I'm going to rely on you. So I'm going to listen. I'm going to participate. I'm going to email. I'm going to make sure you know that I'm there, and I'm going to support. And then you support them, and you make yourself known so that you at least are as connected as you can be connected. It's not perfect. By no means is it perfect. But if you can make yourself at least being a participant, that's better than nothing. So I think a lot of people, I think we have to consider this. A lot of people aren't going back because they looked around and like, my church is a mess. And look, there's other things out here better. Now, some of those things that they found better are just not located anywhere near them. So now in some cases, I think they may find better 3 blocks away, but they don't want to, they've become used to listening at home. Now that's dangerous. If you can get there, get there. If you can drive there, drive there. If you can, make it go. I mean, please do. I mean, we've had people drive long distances to attend this church. So please show up if you can. If you can't, then support in every way possible. But make yourself a part of it to some level, please. So I think a lot of people felt like, you know what, man, my church is a mess. And so when the pandemic happened, they could shop around. They shopped around. They found better alternative. And I think in many cases, those motives are pure and right because they're not happy with the church. And it's not like a fleshly thing. So I think that's to consider. But I think there are a lot of people who realized, wait a minute, I can go to church sitting right here. I can just sit in my house and I can get the sermon. I mean, I don't really care about the singing. I don't really care about the prayer. I don't really care about sitting next to anybody. Don't really care about the Lord's Supper. Maybe, I don't really care about anything else. I just care about the sermon. I can get the sermon. I don't want to go back. I think some people just because of the convenience of it. I understand the convenience of it. I understand. But please understand this. And I'm even going to say this, and I don't want to say this. If you decide not to go back, because of the convenience of it, I think you really need to look into your heart. I think you need to look into your heart. But I would ask you to consider this. Please consider this. This is very important. Even if you decide not to go back, please do everything you can to support the ministry by listening. Do whatever you can to at least keep the ministry viable, right? I mean, the ministry can't survive without people and support. It's that simple. So I think some people the convenience of it is a temptation. It is convenient. It is very convenient. You just sit at home. You don't have to get up. You don't have to go anywhere. But the New Testament, I mean, just think of the Greek word ekklesia. I know there's major issues with why it's translated church, because really the word ecclesia refers to a local assembly, a called out assembly. It's referring to a local congregation, a local assembly. That the New Testament understands people coming together, assembling themselves together. Forsake not the assembly. We need to assemble ourselves. So at least consider going. But if you don't go back, then at least keep the ministry operating. At least keep it working another day. At least keep it surviving, because if it doesn't survive, it's over. We have to consider this. I mean, the numbers are like, some of the polls, the numbers are, troubling. Some of the numbers are staggering. In fact, I got a thing from Lifeway just the other day. I don't know if I have it here. They sent me a little advertisement with some statistics going, hey, guess what? You're back to in-person services. If you're a church doing small groups and you've been doing small groups via Zoom, well, the percentages of Lifeway's research, a large portion of the people, they're not going to come back to your in-person small group. They're not coming back. So you're going to have a Zoom digital format, or you're going to lose those people. That's what Lifeway's warning. You're going to have to come up with a digital Zoom formula, or you're going to lose those people. Now, you can say, well, we're just going to lose the people. Like, what do you do? So that even for churches that have small groups, some of the people are not even going to go back to the small groups. I mean, this is again, I don't know how serious it's going to be. Put it this way. This is what we'll know. The end 2022, when we get into 2022, maybe the end of 2022, I think we're going to find out exactly where those numbers lie for churches. How many churches survive? How many churches drastically decreased in number? So I think we have to take into account that many shopped around and found better options. Okay? That's understandable. That can happen. And hopefully they found better options, and they found better options in the sense they found churches that taught doctrine, theology, more in-depth preaching, and they found it better. Now, if it's close by, go. If it's not close by, and you feel like your other church has changed so much you cannot go back, then wherever you're finding your spiritual nourishment, do everything you can to really be a participant. Don't be anonymous. Be a part, support, and keep that ministry going. And then pray for some way to find a local situation where you can resolve that problem. If you just stop going because it's convenient, I really challenge you to look in your heart. I really challenge you to look at your heart. And again, I just say this because here's the thing. You don't go back. I mean, just think about this. I'll just take my church into consideration. If everyone decided not to come back, does this church exist? It stops being a church. It's over. It's done. So then what happens to all that live streaming you're getting at home? You're not getting anymore. Okay, it's gone. The church is finished. It's gone. Right? This building goes bye-bye. The lights are turned off. The air conditioner's turned off. The internet connection goes by. It's all gone. Right? So unless you're just going to support basically a podcasting, hey, we're going to pay the church. We're no longer a church. We're just now a bunch of people who listen to a podcast and send money to the podcaster so that podcaster can keep the building and keep getting paid. Like that. That's kind of a weird situation there. So just realize that, yes, you may be at home and you're like, it's convenient. Yeah. And if enough people say what you say, no one's going to be there and the church is over, and then gets that convenient live streaming. I guess what you would say, I'll just find live streaming somewhere else. And it's like, okay, if Netflix goes away, I've got other streaming services. Hey, if Amazon Music goes away, I've got streaming services. If Spotify goes away, I've got other streaming services. So maybe that's the mentality that's crept in. So some people, I think, found something better. Others, I think, just they fell in love with the convenience, right? And I think there's a possible third situation here, okay? I know I said I wasn't going to number them. I think many people have just grown very frustrated and tired of church. They haven't grown tired of Bible teaching. They haven't grown tired of doctrine. They haven't grown tired of theology. They haven't grown tired of church history. They have a hunger to learn, but they just think church is, with its politics, its money, it's all of it's cliques. It's you got to be, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to talk a certain way. That there's just so much that they just are. I think people have grown tired of the church as an organization, and I think maybe the pandemic just gave people to realize, you know what, I can get the Bible teaching and the theology, and I don't need the church anymore. Now, I would really challenge you to see if that attitude is biblical. Right? Christ loved the church, gave himself for the church, gave apostles and teachers and evangelists for the equipping of the church. In the book of Revelation, you have letters to churches. The implication in the New Testament is you'll be a part of a church. But I think a lot of people have grown tired of it. I think there's still much interest out there about learning the Bible. I think there's still much interest about doctrine, theology. I think there's still people out there, they're starving to death for doctrine, for theology, for church history. They feel like they're in a land where there's a famine and they're starving. And if you provide that, they will come, they will listen, and they will participate. But I think they're kind of just like church as an organization. It's just, ugh. And I think they've grown tired of it. And those attitudes are starting to manifest itself. So I think you have some who just like, hey, they started shopping around. They're like, the church is changing, and they found better than the changing church that they're in. And they're like, I'm done. All right, well, if that's you, again, it's not the best opportunity. It's not, but find those ministries that are supporting you and support them to the best. I mean, with everything you have, because they can't survive without support. So if you're going to say, well, here's the ministry that's feeding me, okay, great. They're feeding you, but you're going to have to do what you can or they won't be around, okay? I think ministries right now are going to find themselves trying to figure out what they're going to do. And I think that's why more and more Christian podcasts and many ministries are going to a pay format because they got to survive, which is troubling. It's just troubling, right? So I think you have that. I think you have two, that some people just fell in love with convenience. They just fell in love, hey, man, it's get up and go to church. I mean, okay, I'll show up Sunday morning, but why am I coming back Sunday night? I was there Sunday morning. Sunday night, I'll just listen to you. And I understand that. I understand that, right? It's easy to do. I mean, even as a pastor, I'm like, okay, well, you don't want to come back Sunday night, or I'll show up here at 2, do a broadcast, post it online, and go, hey, everyone, here's your sermon for 6 o'clock tonight or whenever you listen. Enjoy. And then I go home and I'm done with my day of work at church. By 4 o'clock, I'm at home. 5 o'clock, I'm at home. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's convenient for me too. But you keep going that path, the church is gone. Church is gone. And I think another situation is some people have just grown tired of the church. Now, the church is changing. And I don't think it's going to get any better. The political hijacking is going to continue, eating it from the right and the left. In the middle, you've got doctrinal chaos, theological chaos, compromise everywhere. You got horrible preaching, bad hermeneutics, no theology, no church history. If I get another email from someone going, you mentioned something about church history, and I've never been taught that. I'm like, you've been in church how long and you never heard a sermon on that? What is going on in your church, right? It's staggering what's happening in some churches. So the church is changing, and guess what? When the church is changing, you're going to find a lot of people who, especially who are biblically minded, are going to be like, well, I'm done with it. And that's a problem. And then once they become done with the church, then in their mind, well, I can just sit at home and listen to the preaching. Well, wonderful that you can find all the preaching in the world online. But I'm just saying, the people that are feeding you, if you don't support them, you're not going to have that preaching and teaching. There's something going on. The church is changing and people are missing. That's a reality. A changing church and a church that's missing people. doesn't look good for the future. Now, I think ultimately for biblical prophecy, that's how it's going to get. The church is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And I don't know, I just know that for those of us who believe in the scriptures and believe in doctrine and theology and the preaching of God's word, we're going to have to come together. We're going to have to support things, or we're going to wake up one day and go, I can't find God's word anywhere. Where am I going to hear it preached? Well, everything that you were benefiting from, you didn't support it and it went away. I mean, God doesn't rain down support from heaven, right? He uses his people in order to support these things. So it's going to require some people to decide what they're going to do and what they're going to be committed to. All right. So there you go. Just again, make sure you judge this stream of consciousness, just sharing some things that are happening within Christianity. All right, I'll stop right there. You can email me your disagreement, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I wanted to go, my original plan, once I started talking, I was going to go, okay, the church is being basically hijacked from the right and from the left, and then I was going to look at some other areas, but then I just jumped to the Southern Baptist and the Methodist as examples. I didn't really articulate or outline that perfectly, but I think you get kind of the idea. The bottom line is the church is changing. There's a great concern about how many people are missing and how many people may not come back. And I think there's some reasons, there's maybe some legitimate reasons why some people are not coming back. But I just know for some churches can't make it. Like if you got a church of 10,000 and 3,000 doesn't come back, great, right? I mean, you can still survive. Maybe you have to cut back with some budget issues, but you can probably still survive. And if you can find some way to bring in some money online, you may be okay. But if you're a church of 30, right? If a church of 30, and that's 30 on a Sunday morning, and when you take Sunday night and Wednesday, you have far less than 30, and you lose 10, 15. The times are coming to an end quickly. The end. Put a for sale sign on the front of the church, it's over. All right. And if you have even smaller than that and you lose a few people, it doesn't take a lot. So, very, very troubling times and difficult times. But you know what we do? No matter how bad the situation gets, you preach in season and out of season. You preach in season and out of season. That's all you can do is just try to stay faithful to what God calls us to do. And then whatever happens, happens. So just some thoughts on a very trying and troubling time in which we live. And the church is trying to figure it out. And it's not just my church. Churches everywhere are trying to figure this out. Some churches are reporting, hey, we're great. We increased by 500 people. That's great. That's one. Praise God that if you increased. Others are like, we don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of different stories. There's always exceptions, but I think there's a general concern, or at least a troubling concern. Now, listen, some of these stories that mentions the people leaving, they don't mention the changing church. And I think that there's a correspondence there. Maybe people are leaving and people are missing because the church is changing. I think we have to consider both aspects there. We can't separate these stories, and that's why I tried to bring them together. All right, I'll stop right there. Email me newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. All right, God bless.